Today, we're venturing into some really unique source material.
We are. It's excerpts from a YouTube podcast interview with Riaan Swiegelaar.
Right, the co-founder of the First Satanic Church in South Africa. Quite a story there.
Absolutely. And our mission really is to try and understand his journey. I mean, it's quite remarkable.
It really is. We want to explore how he went from, co-founding this church to then having this recent, very profound experience embracing Jesus.
Yeah, we'll unpack his background, what really drove him to start the church in the first place, then that pivotal moment that changed everything for him.
And where he stands now, his current beliefs.
Exactly.
And just to be clear, this isn't about judging. It's about understanding a huge personal shift.
Belief, identity, the search for meaning, it's all in there.
Definitely. It promises, I think, a really fascinating look at those themes. You might find some surprising insights, maybe even shift your perspective a bit.
Could happen.
Okay, so let's get into it. Riaan's background. It sounds like it really set the stage for him feeling like an outsider, almost from the beginning.
That seems right. The picture is someone who felt, well, different in a few key ways early on.
He grew up middle class, Africans, Calvinistic environment in South Africa. That's a very specific cultural and religious setting, isn't it?
Very. Rooted in the Dutch Reformed tradition, often quite conservative, especially back then. And his family moved quite a bit, too.
Oh, right, because of his parents' jobs in banking.
Yeah, banking careers. So maybe not that constant, deep community connection you might get staying in one place.
Which maybe ties into that feeling of disconnect from the church he mentions. Feeling it from a young age, like he never quite had that personal God connection people spoke of.
And it wasn't just the religious side. Between 14 and 16, he realized he was gay.
Which in the 1980s, in that specific environment.
Exactly. It led to, well, negativity and rejection from family, from the church. It was a tough time for that.
Incredibly isolating, you have to imagine. And on top of that, he describes these spiritual sensitivities he had since childhood. Mediumship, he calls it.
And he's careful to make a distinction, isn't he? It wasn't about predicting fortunes or just being psychic.
Right. More like a sensitivity to energies, premonitions even.
Yes. He mentions mediumship, which usually implies communication with spirits. And he gives that example predicting his mother's pregnancy when he was just 4.
And saying, Jesus told me. Wow.
Yeah. It shows this early awareness, but he learned pretty quickly to keep those things quiet. Fear of rejection again.
That's quite poignant, isn't it? That childhood spiritual sense meeting potential pushback. You can see how after high school, he might drift towards atheism.
Trying to reconcile it all. His spirituality, his sexuality, the religious background. It's a lot.
Definitely. So after feeling disconnected and exploring atheism, how did the path eventually lead towards Satanism?
Well, it wasn't like a sudden jump. It sounds like the culmination of a long search.
A search for what? Divinity? Belonging?
Both, I think. He explored different paths, traditional healing, Buddhism, trying to understand divinity. He even mentions reading, like every religious text he could get his hands on.
That's dedication. Shows a real hunger for answers.
And then, about 5 years before this interview, when he was feeling particularly low, lost, rejected, that's when he first read the Satanic Bible.
Okay, and what was it about that text at that moment?
Context is key here. He talks about feeling intense anger towards Christianity specifically.
Why the anger?
Because he felt he hadn't experienced love or acceptance from Christians, generally speaking. He does mention 4 exceptions later, people he saw showing Christ's love, but the dominant feeling was rejection.
Ah, okay. So the Satanic Bible.
It resonated. Its philosophy, in a way, embraces being an outcast, and that's exactly how he felt.
So it validated his feelings of hurt and marginalization.
Precisely. He explicitly agrees later that many Satanists are lost and broken people. He says he was one of them then, even if he didn't fully see it.
And his take on the philosophy itself is interesting, rooted in anger.
Yeah, he points out that anger is central, and how that feeling of anger can be mistaken for real power.
That's a crucial distinction. Anger feels potent, but maybe isn't sustainable strength.
Right. And he connects it back, interestingly, to his earlier witchcraft practice. He'd done that for 15 years before Satanism.
Using anger in rituals then, too.
Yes, trying to use that anger to, quote, make things happen.
So he finds this philosophy that resonates with his anger and feeling like an outcast. How does that lead to actually co-founding a church?
Well, he practiced Satanism for about 2 years, getting deeper into it. Then came the move to co-found the church. He was 3 years old when he did this interview.
And he was the public face, not the only founder.
Correct. He's clear about that. He became the spokesperson, the one out front.
Stepping into that role, representing something so controversial that suggests a strong conviction at the time.
It does. He talks about finally feeling like he belonged somewhere, like the philosophy really resonated for the first time, really.
But he also looks back now and sees the motivation differently.
Yes, he's quite candid. He admits the drive to make the church public was fueled by that anger, that pain. He even says he used his gift of sight, those spiritual sensitivities.
To push it forward.
Right, propel it. He sees choosing darkness, as he calls it, as a direct result of feeling so rejected earlier in life.
Okay, so he's deeply involved, the public face. What happens next? What was the turning point? It sounds dramatic.
It seems like a few things started lining up, maybe creating cracks in his foundation. He mentions an interview with Cape Talk Radio.
What was significant about that?
Afterwards, just a simple human moment, the producer, a woman, gave him this really loving embrace, unexpectedly.
Huh, just kindness.
Just genuine kindness. And for him, given his history, it felt huge, really significant, a stark contrast to the rejection he often felt.
Amazing how small acts can land like that. Did it stay with him?
It did, because about a week later, he happened to look at WhatsApp statuses, which he says he rarely does, and saw a Bible verse on that same producer status.
Oh, interesting. Surprising for him.
Very. It challenged his assumptions,
Yeah.
maybe, about who this person was who had shown him such acceptance.
So, little moments chipping away, but the big shift, the catalyst that happened at a church council meeting.
That seems to be the core event, yes. He was asked to perform a ritual, using divination to figure out the church's future direction.
Okay.
But this specific ritual they wanted, he felt resistant. It involved invoking what he called a demonic cluster.
A demonic cluster. What does that mean in this context?
He explained it as like a group of demons associated with a principality, something hierarchical, and crucially, something he'd never actually done before.
Sounds like a line he hadn't crossed, but he considered it.
He did. And he's honest about why. Part of the motivation was financial. The church, his witchcraft practice, they were sources of income.
So despite his unease...
Despite the unease, he decided to go ahead, kind of opening a door he hadn't opened before.
And that's when it happened, during the ritual itself.
That's the moment.
Oh.
As he started, he describes this powerful, direct encounter.
With Jesus.
Wow. Just like it. His first thought was denial, hallucination, a trick.
Understandable reaction.
But then this overwhelming flood of love, just immense. And crucially, it felt familiar.
Familiar how?
He recognized it from the radio producer's hug and from 2 other times in his past with Christians who had shown him that same kind of unconditional love.
So those earlier moments were like reference points for this huge experience.
Exactly. Allowed him to identify what he was feeling. And it wasn't just a feeling. He says he had a conversation.
With Jesus.
With Jesus, yes.
Yeah.
And later with God. The whole thing left him physically drained, just wiped out by the intensity.
I can only imagine what happened after that immediate experience.
He woke up the next morning and felt peace, a profound sense of peace, and this absolute certainty that his life had fundamentally changed forever.
Did he describe, what did he see?
He described seeing Jesus physically, of Middle Eastern descent, with these incredibly intense, deep eyes he couldn't look into for long, and feeling that love physically emanating from his heart.
That's incredibly vivid, and the conversations continued.
The ones with Jesus were direct in that moment. The talks with God came later, often when he was walking on the beach early in the morning.
Did he ever get an answer to why him? Why this way?
He asked, and the answer he got was direct. Because I need you for the kingdom of God, and I need you now.
Now. Any reason given for the timing?
Yes, he was told it related to significant global events coming up, and that it was becoming crucial for people to choose between light and dark, essentially.
And the emphasis was on love, not religion.
Exactly. He stresses that. The core message wasn't about joining a church, but about the principle of love.
So after an experience like that, how do you even begin to process it and live differently? What happened next?
Well, it's fascinating how he frames his past now. He says he doesn't regret the Satanism part. He sees it as a necessary T-junction on his path.
A T-junction, like a turning point he had to reach.
Kind of, part of the journey. Though he's quick to add, he wouldn't encourage anyone else to go down that road to just dabble in it.
And how did he handle telling his former followers the church?
He thought about that. He doesn't feel he let down the original members, but hopes the newer ones might also have their eyes open, as he puts it.
Who did he tell first?
The church council and his co-founder, Audrey. Her reaction: she respected his choice, even if maybe she didn't fully grasp the experience.
But the official church reaction was different.
Yes, pretty decisive. Other members were told not to communicate with him.
Wow. That must have been difficult.
He ended up having to block a lot of people. Yeah. But interestingly, he says the general public reaction has been mostly supportive.
Really? Despite the controversial nature of it all.
Seems so. He mentions some negativity on Facebook, but he chooses to ignore that. And importantly, his husband, who he described as agnostic before.
Has he been supportive?
Completely supportive throughout this whole massive shift.
That's huge. What about the Christian community? How have they reacted?
It's been mixed, it sounds like. He's received a lot of love and acceptance from many, but also questions. Doubts about whether his salvation is real, if it's valid.
How does he respond to that?
By turning it back, in a way. He questions their understanding of the Holy Spirit. Like, if they doubt God can work this way, maybe their view is limited.
He seems less concerned with labels now.
Very much so. He dismisses the Christian label itself as not really mattering to him. His focus is just listening to God, following that guidance directly.
Which sounds like a very personal, direct connection he's forged.
Absolutely. And he sees his own shift as part of something bigger. He believes this divide between, say, Satanists and Christians might actually strengthen.
Why?
He views it as part of a larger global sorting out, a separation of light and darkness happening now.
He has a whole cosmology around this, doesn't he?
Yeah, he talks about this spiritual history, a separation from a unified source leading to our current pain and suffering. And now is the time to choose love, choose light, to reconnect.
And he wrote all this down.
A huge amount. 740 pages of notes, he says, from his conversations with God and Spirit. Came incredibly quickly.
Wow. And central to his current belief is Christ's resurrection.
Yes, he sees that as crucial, proof of life after death, and that Jesus's main message, above all, was love and connection. Connection between people and with the divine.
How does he think people find that connection?
He believes it's personal. You find it by pursuing your purpose, using your unique gifts. Everyone has them.
And he feels he's received grace, forgiveness.
Very strongly, and crucially, he believes that's available to everyone, no matter what. He doesn't see himself as special in that sense.
Just someone who had a particular experience.
Right. He uses that analogy going from the basement to the penthouse. A dramatic shift in perspective and state.
But again, clarifies he doesn't believe in Christianity, the religion.
Correct. Believes in God, believes in Jesus Christ, but finds organized religion itself often divisive.
So what is his focus now? What's he trying to do?
It's very action-oriented, teaching about love, helping others heal, and he has this big vision. Creating a network.
A network of what?
Of gifted individuals, people who can offer spiritual, emotional support, and making it accessible, even if people can't afford to pay.
That sounds ambitious. How would it work?
Like a hub, connecting people to resources that already exist, healers, treatment centers, even reaching into prisons.
Let's try in that.
He says he wants to pay it forward, to share the love and grace he feels he's received. And he really highlights the power of small acts of kindness, too.
The kind of act that maybe started his own shift, like that producer's hug.
Exactly. He sees the significance in those moments.
And he doesn't want to be a leader in the Christian world.
No desire for that. He emphasizes any wisdom he shares isn't his own. It comes from God.
Was there another reason he left the Satanic Church beyond the encounter?
Yes, he realized something important. His very public role there was actually stopping people he felt he was meant to help from ever approaching him. It created a barrier.
Ah, that makes sense. So leaving was also about opening himself up to help others differently?
It seems so.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive into Riaan Swiegelaar's experience, it's really traced an incredible arc.
It really has. From feeling like an outsider early on, finding a place in Satanism fueled by anger and needing belonging, right through to this, well, transformative encounter, a whole new perspective on faith and love.
What stands out as the most surprising elements, would you say?
For me, it's the sheer directness of the described experience with Jesus, that immediate total shift in perspective, the palpable feeling of unconditional love he described.
Yeah, and that sense he has of a bigger cosmic picture unfolding.
Definitely. We hope, for you listening, that breaking down this complex story has offered some unique insights into belief, into change, without being overwhelming.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Reflect on the power a single moment of connection can have. or the potential for these huge, unexpected shifts, even in beliefs we hold very deeply.
What does Ryan's story make you think about belief itself? About that search for meaning we all have?
And about the impact of love, of acceptance, maybe when it's least expected. It's certainly a lot to think about long after this deep dive ends.